Hello and welcome to the Six Sales podcast. This is Mike Nicholson from Six Sales. Today I'm going to be speaking to Emily Roberts, but before we do, can I just say a big thank you to the team at Lumen Research for sponsoring the Six Sales podcast. For those that don't know, Lumen Research are an eye-tracking technology company that are helping brands to plan, buy, optimize and measure their media and creative investments towards real human attention. So thank you to the team at Lumen. And Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. Nice to have you here. So we're going to talk about responsible marketing today. Yeah. But before we do, as is traditional, could you just tell us a little bit about responsible marketing advisory and what you do, please?
Yeah, of course. So I wear two hats. So by day, I'm the head of digital at Responsible Marketing Advisory, and then by night, I'm the co-founder of the Women in Programmatic Network. So fairly busy schedule. But Responsible Marketing Advisory is a consultancy, so we do a whole kind of load of different things, but underpinned by responsible marketing. So for instance, we're doing a lot around social media governance, influencer governance, which is obviously a big thing, a big focus for brands this year. And then my part is more programmatic digital, so looking at processes where brands are running, and improving kind of their brand safety and governance around that as well.
Okay, cool. You work with some quite big brands. I don't know if you want to mention them on air. We were talking before, but so you basically work as a part of their team and outsource part of their team, right? And help them to do that part of the marketing mix.
Yeah, exactly. So working with a really large brand at the moment, and they have loads and loads of different brands globally within their kind of portfolio. And essentially what they found is every market has been setting up Instagram pages, Facebook pages for the brand, kind of doing whatever they want. And so it's ended up with thousands and thousands of social media pages. And so the team is being tasked with having to go through and review all of them and make sure they're brand safe. So you can imagine it's a bit of a task for us.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about responsible marketing and in particular the Adelytics report that came out recently. Such a coincidence, life's full of coincidences, I know, but such a coincidence. When I was planning to have this conversation with you, I knew it was going to be about the Adelytics report, obviously, because we connected on LinkedIn around that. My mind went back to when I worked at OpenX, and there was a front page headline on the Times about YouTube and advertisers funding terror. And I kind of say with tongue in cheek, the only time that advertising normally gets on the front page is if it's a 20x2. You know, if it's an actual ad, you don't often see advertising talked about on the front page. But it was a really big deal. And then I listened to you on the Media Leader podcast in preparation for this one, and you were working at Google at the time. So can you give us your take on that from that sort of that point of view?
Yeah, of course. So it was in 2017. We were all in the office on a Friday, obviously pre-pandemic. And a journalist from the Times basically went to Google and said, we found all this information, the fact that your advertisers are monetising really inappropriate content on YouTube. And we're going to release this article on Monday. And yeah, it's going to be a difficult time for you guys. And this was very much like, it still felt like a bit of a startup within YouTube. So brands were still pretty wary about running on YouTube channels and stuff because they were aware that anybody could post anything on YouTube and specific adverts could run. So there was brand safety concerns anyway, but this kind of exacerbated it. And on the Monday, the phone was ringing off the hook. Over 250 advertisers pulled their advertising campaigns off YouTube. And Matt Britton, who was president at the time, in that morning it was Adweek Europe, and had to go on stage in front of about 10 journalists and speak about Google and YouTube advertising. And there was a Q&A session at the end, and he got bombarded with questions. And essentially, I think that was the first big focus around brand safety, brand suitability, and the fact that a lot of the social media sites cannot control the content to a degree that is being uploaded. And YouTube came out and said that at the time there was so much content being uploaded kind of every minute that they weren't able to review it, like even if they had manual reviews or obviously using AI. And now they've obviously constricted kind of what advertisers are running on. But yeah, it was a really interesting time at YouTube to run on that.
And it was relatively early in the video on demand explosion, I suppose. Not early, but it was only probably 5 years in. And as you say, user-generated content was still on the fence, wasn't it? Well, should we do that? Should we not do that? So the timing couldn't really have been worse, because YouTube was starting to grow quite quickly, and brands were starting to sort of maybe ease their stance towards user-generated content until, of course, something like that happens, and you say 250 brands say, no, we're not doing that anymore. But they came back, so they did all right in the end, didn't they? So YouTube's doing not too bad, should we say. So fast forward to 2025, and we got a headline on the BBC that says how big tech ad systems helped fund child abuse online. So we've gone from funding terrorism in 2017 on the front page of the Times, with brands like Mercedes, Waitrose accused, should we say. And now we've got the Adelytics report, which was behind this BBC headline, and brands like Amazon and Google, ironically, we're just talking about them, Criteo, Quantcast, Microsoft, Outbrain, and many others that have been named as advertisers on a site that basically has child abuse content on it. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, so pretty shocking. So when it came out, I put it on a WhatsApp group, the fact that I think a lot of things haven't changed since what happened in YouTube in 2017. And saying to the group, like, how can we change this? And I think a lot of those brands would be really shocked that they'd ended up on that. And I think a lot of the industry are wondering how on earth that happened. And there was a lot of different, obviously, reasons behind what had happened. But ultimately, it comes down to the fact that advertisers, agencies have to be aware of every single site that they run on. And a lot of people, I think, are going to be like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of programmatic then. It's meant to be kind of right time, right place, wherever the user is. But fundamentally, if you're an advertiser running on illegal content like that, then you kind of have to go back to the basics and start really reviewing what sites you're on. So those brands are going to be very concerned as to what's happened.
Yeah. I don't know what your view on this is. And I think that the transparency thing is largely to blame for this, because I was reading through the Adelytics report, and one of the advertisers, I can't remember which one, but basically said, well, we don't know because they won't tell us where it's running, as if that was okay. And I don't know what you think about that, but I don't think that is okay. And also I would be scared stiff if I was a CMO signing off millions of pounds of money to be spent somewhere, but I don't know where. Like, what's your view on that? I mean, you've worked with insider brands, obviously, and what's the view that you take on that, and that, your clients take on that?
Yeah, so I think the word programmatic and transparency are always kind of mentioned in the same sentence. I think there's a bit of a balance. So I've worked at media owners, so the BBC and the Guardian. And about 5 years ago, it was really popular for brands, agencies to come to us and say, we want all our log level data that's run on the BBC. And essentially, you'd export that and it'd be hundreds of thousands of rows of data. That's transparency to a degree, but what use is that amount of data going to be for a brand or agency? But then at the other end, you're happy to kind of run on all these types of sites. So I think it's a balance. I think being very, very careful with working with resellers, if not at all, I would advise. Essentially working with premium publishers. The reality is now that news brands and a lot of quality media owners are losing more money than they ever have done before. And yet, brands are happy or not happy, but are running on sites like this. So I think there's a big polarization between the two. But I think when it comes to transparency, reviewing your site list, knowing exactly who you're running on, for a brand, it's just not acceptable to have no idea what you're running on. And that should be something that's reviewed like constantly. So I did a piece of work for a large UK advertiser, and they had basically chosen a site list that was 100 really quality basic URLs, media owners. And they sent it to the agency, and the agency was like, well, that's not going to have enough reach. This brand was UK only, and they expanded that site list to over 500 sites. A lot of them weren't then UK sites, so they were running on French, German sites for a UK brand. And as you can imagine, the brand was really not happy when they found that out. But the only way they found that out was because we basically were asked to go in and review the processes that the agency were running with the brands. So I think this could be a very manual process for a lot of advertisers, and a lot of advertisers agencies are very time poor at the moment. They don't have time to be reviewing kind of exactly where they've run or where they've run. So I think there's a real importance of kind of taking a step back, consistently reviewing site lists, but also bring in consultancies as necessary. And of course, I'm going to say that I work for a consultancy, but having done the work I've done, I really realised the value of bringing somebody in that's a third party, doesn't know your processes, being walked through those and understanding it all from scratch, because every brand is so different. Like one brand could have one market, one brand, whereas others that I've worked on have kind of over 50 brands, 190 markets, and it's really difficult to have an overview of all of that.
Yeah, that's I've got a little saying for that. We do a similar thing at 6Ls with coming in with fresh eyes, and we call it a helicopter view, which is what most of your clients or your ideal clients have of your business before they get into the weeds. Yeah. But as you work there for 2, 3, 4 years, you're in the weeds now, and it's really difficult for you as a marketer in the weeds to understand what you need to say for somebody in a helicopter to understand what you do, because you know too much and you can't unlearn what you've learned. It sounds like a similar approach to you. Are you going to come in and say, right, I don't know anything about your setup, now tell me that, and why is that happening like that, and why do you do it like that? Because it maybe makes the marketers sort of question themselves. Well, I don't know, we've always done it like that. Like, okay,
exactly.
Well, that's not.
And there's always like, unfortunately, even if the process is pristine and being tried and tested, there's always mistakes that are going to be made. So I had one large brand that I worked with where the agency had applied the exclusion list as the inclusion list. So it meant that the brand only ran on really dodgy content that they didn't want to run on for like months. And unfortunately, again, if you're really time poor, the agency are just trying to hit their KPIs and focus on kind of low CPMs, high performance, then they might not notice that. And so that's why, it's so important, I think, in programmatic to go in and do that.
So I'm not at the coalface of buying too many digital campaigns. I have to hold my hands up to that. But I started selling digital advertising before there was programmatic. Okay, so the process, loosely speaking, was the agency would come to the media owner. They would say, we want to buy a certain amount of impressions across a certain amount of, so I was at the Telegraph at the time. So it might be Hellmann's mayonnaise. This one always sticks in my mind for some reason, really strange. And we want to buy your food section, and then we're going to buy an amount run a site. And then they'd do that deal. They'd give you the creative. There's no third-party tracking. There's no third-party ad servers. Give you the creative. Then they go to the Guardian, have the same conversation with the Guardian. Then they go to the Independent, have the same conversation. So it was really like there was a lot of heavy lifting involved. But there was enough reach, right? Now, programmatic came along, and the number of sites on a plan you just alluded to there, like it can go from we're getting the whole campaign away on 12 sites to now there's 1,200 sites. Yeah. And that's, I think that's probably where a lot of the problems are coming, right? Because there's people inserting themselves in as one of those 1,200 sites that are kind of getting away with it, if you like. I mean, I can't remember the name of the site that was in that analytics report. Probably wouldn't want to name them anyway, because just in case anybody ever went there, God forbid. But but there's too many opportunities for bad actors to insert themselves into the process and take money away from, as you said, premium publishers who are helping sort of keep democracy, flying, holding politicians to account. None of that can happen without advertising revenue. Yeah.
And the problem is with that site was it wasn't just for like SISM related content. It was for just uploading pictures and then for them to be deleted. And obviously probably then benefits certain people. But if you looked at that URL, you would have had no idea. And that's the problem, is like, even if you're reviewing your site list and you're looking at hundreds of thousands at speed, you're not going to know that that was the kind of site where that content would run. We did a study when I was at PwC to understand what the ideal number of sites is to run, and we found that anything under 500 was enough to have reach. The problem is that I think a lot of brands have enormous amounts of exclusion, inclusion lists. When I was at kind of The Guardian, the BBC, we would have things like Trump, Putin on a list, which obviously brands don't want to run next to. But then at the same time, you'd have things like Shoot, and we spoke before, but like that would mean that all your great football content had been then, ads couldn't run on them. And so there's a real big difference between running on the open web and having kind of a keyword list, but you're running on anything, versus running on media owners and blocking really quality inventory just for kind of fear. And so a lot of the advertisers, I would say, work directly with some of those premium publishers, and obviously the likes of the big social media platforms, a lot of agencies have trading deals with. But the reality is a lot of the news brands, a lot of the other premium publishers, people don't have trading deals with. They're incredibly premium, and they're incredibly important nowadays, especially with like what's going on in the news. We need news sites more than ever, and yet, advertisers are afraid to run on them. So there is a massive polarization between running on the open web and running on these sites.
That's another thing that's changed since the old days, shall I say, when I started in press before the internet was a thing. Advertisers used to clamour for early, ideally right-hand pages, because the view, when you open the page and the first things in front of you is page 3, and then you open it again, it's page 5, page 7. And so the earlier and the more, a right-hand page as early as you can get is what anyone wanted. The price went up as you got nearer the front of the book and on the right-hand page. But that's where all the hard news was. Yeah. And as long as it wasn't an airline advertising on an air crash story, they were all right with that. So if it was murder, rape, war, crack on, like, long as we get an early right-hand page. Yeah. But then when digital kind of started to grow, it's the same news on the same brand, so the Telegraph, Guardian, Independent, all of the different news brands. But now, to your point there with the keyword search, keyword targeting or exclusion lists, so many of the stories are excluded for ridiculous reasons, quite frankly. You mentioned Shoot there. I can't remember the name of the publisher, but during Euro 2022, they lost something like half of their inventory in a time where they really couldn't afford to lose half of their inventory because of words like shoot. But it's difficult to write a football article without the word shoot in it. So there's no context around the word shoot. It's just shoot is bad. And that's clearly not right. There's very few words that are bad in and of themselves. They're bad in the context in which they're used, right? So it feels like we need contextual keyword targeting at least, or block lists. Yeah. How is this word being used? Is it negative, positive? But it seems like a really crazy way that the world's changed, from brands being absolutely fine to run in really hard news to so scared of it. Yeah. And yet we see things like this happening where sites that are, supporting child abuse content, they're on that, and no one's suggesting that they want to be on that or that they did that on purpose. But if the same amount of rigor that went into making sure that they're not against a story with Donald Trump in it was applied to child abuse and extortation and extremism and stuff like that, then maybe we'd be in a better shape. So I'm going to say something that's probably really ignorant, and you tell me what you think about this. But surely, if you went to SimilarWeb and looked for the top 500 URLs as your starting point, because you mentioned 500 is enough for reach, right? And then just delete the ones where you think, I'm not 100% sure that that's okay. Yeah. So there's a certain amount of trust, right? Trust is important. So the titles we've worked for, BBC, Telegraph, Guardian, people generally think they'll probably look after us. They're not going to have anything awful on there. They've got standards. They've got journalistic integrity. Yeah. They might say something we don't necessarily agree with, but we can trust them as far as you can trust anyone. Yeah. And then you go down and go, well, I don't know what this site is. We'll take it off. I don't know what this site is. I'll take it off, right? And then you end up with a kind of an okay list, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that site that we're talking about wouldn't have been on that list.
No.
And if it was on that list, you'd have looked at it and gone, I don't know what that is, take it off.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it not that easy?
Well, you'd think it would be, wouldn't you? I think the issue with what's happened with this Adelytics report is the fact that site had ads.txt in. So if you're just going out and running campaigns on ads.txt sites and sellers.json, that website would have still been, like, an advertiser would have still run on there. Obviously, Double Verify, IES are scanning a lot of pages, but because of how that website worked, where pages are constantly being created, deleted, Double Verify and IES have essentially said we can't crawl every single page as soon as a page is created, like across the whole web. It's ridiculous, right? And so you end up with that. So the only way of not running on stuff like that is a site list, working directly with quality publishers. And yeah, it's a real challenge. I think I'm very lucky in the fact that when I was at The Guardian, I could see where the revenue was going from the advertisers. So was in the sales team, working with agencies, working with brands, but at the same time, I was able to go to morning conference. I don't know if you ever went when you were at the Telegraph.
No.
But essentially where all the major journalists would sit in a room with Kath Finer, who was the editor, and talk about the latest news. And we had one guy, he was a journalist who I'll always remember because he'd basically been given the mission to go and work in a chicken factory for 6 months. And you think, you're a Guardian journalist, I've made it in the world of journalism, and then you get sent to do that kind of job.
Why was that?
And the chicken factory.
Yeah. Why was he sent there?
So he was sent there to do an investigation of basically malpractice within the chicken factory.
Okay.
And he basically found out over 6 months that the factory, which had worked with all the major supermarkets, so you think of supermarket, the chicken was going there, they would be taking the labels off and putting new best before dates on, so they were selling out of date chicken. So when that went on, and this guy had been in the factory for 6 months, I think he mentioned in morning conference that a lot of people that he'd worked with were really confused as to why he was at the factory, because he spoke perfect English and he hadn't been sent to prison. So they were really baffled. But when that came out, all the major supermarkets phoned us and said, we don't want to be on that. Like, remove us from that site. We've been named and shamed. But at the same time, we had an organic pork farmer from Sussex phone us and said, I want to be all over that content. I want to show how great, like, pork farming is and the fact that doesn't happen. And so when it comes to news, it's about brand suitability. It's not about brand safety. You're not funding illegal content like you are here. And I think that's the big differentiator between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And going back to the press days, if British Airways were advertising, there was a rule basically that within the newspaper would make sure it didn't appear next to air crash content, because that's just not suitable. But if it was next to a murder story, it's not ideal, but it's not like a reader's not going to put the two and two together and go, well, that's really bad taste or whatever, because I don't think that the readers of newspapers or news sites look at an ad, look at the content and think that the advertiser agrees with that content. That said, if it's child abuse or extremism, then there's a duty, isn't there, just to make sure that isn't happening, because not only is the money coming away from premium publishers where we need it the most, but it's going towards really bad things and it's helping support really bad things. Yeah,
and so there's been some really interesting articles recently about how it's just going to get worse, unfortunately, with Gen AI. More and more of this types of content are going to come out. So Facebook alone, and to be fair, the social media platforms are doing an awful amount of work to try and stop this. But to give you an example, Facebook last quarter took down 25 million pieces of content. So that's how rife this is. And so as a brand, you have to be really careful. This is going to carry on happening unless you put in precautions. So yeah, pretty scary.
Yeah. So what's the answer then? So how do marketers make sure that they're not on the front page of the Times or the BBC for all the wrong reasons?
Yeah, so I think running with a site list is number one.
And a site list that perhaps not like the one that was in the Adelytics report, where pages can be made instantaneously, randomly from anyone. That sounds like a bad idea, right? Yeah,
no, exactly. Yeah. So I think making a site list of under 500 sites, reviewing that consistently, working with your agency to understand why there might not be enough reach, because there should be, like, we've done the research, we know that is enough sites to get the reach. Working with consultancies as well to really review your processes, and also working with the premium publishers. Go directly to the premium publishers. Any news brand would love to work with an advertiser at the moment. Like, they're really unfortunately struggling, and when I was at the BBC, when the pandemic hit, we had more people coming to us than ever before trying to figure out what on earth was happening with the pandemic. But at the same time, advertisers were refusing to run on anything to do with the pandemic, anything to do with news. And so essentially we lost more money than we ever have done before, even though we had more people coming to the website, which is insane. So working directly with publishers as well is, I think, really important. And advertisers' revenue to kind of have investigative pieces of journalism like the Chicken Factory is really, really important.
Yeah, you get quite ill off chicken. That's I'm a bit worried about that now, and I need to find some way of making sure my chicken's not out of date.
No, indeed.
So, I mean, I feel like we've gone from pre-programmatic, a very small number of sites on a plan, to post-programmatic, enormous number of sites on a plan. But are we coming back the right way again, do you think? Because PMPs have been a thing for quite a while, and now we have curation in the marketplace, where we're looking to handpick sites at a brand level. So for this brand, these are the sites that we should be on. Maybe up to 500 sites, as you say, some for reach, some more specific to the brand. I don't know, so for a hay fever brand, maybe that they need certain health type sites, as well as the broad reach that news and social media give you. Do you feel that we're kind of working our way back that way? We obviously haven't gone far enough if we are, because this is still happening, but do you think that that's kind of happening anyway, as a matter of course? Yeah,
I think to a degree. I think essentially with the economy at the moment, I think performance is being really, really pushed within programmatic, and a lot of brands only use programmatic for performance-based campaigns. And I think that does lead to quite a few problems. The fact that, and I saw a sales deck from a company the other day that said, like, we can get you the lowest CPMs and the best performance, hit all your KPIs. And you think, well, hang on a moment, how are you paying next to nothing and getting like great conversion rates and a really successful campaign? Like, if you went to the supermarket and the supermarket was promising you the cheapest possible meat, you would question that, right? But for some reason, we're not questioning as brands in the industry why, if you're paying a really low CPM, what you're getting for that.
Well, that's a great point. And I think this is a part of the problem that we've had. Again, one of the benefits of having all these grey hairs, as I've seen it from before the genie was out the bottle, as I describe it. But we used to pay premium rates for premium publishers, and everyone was all right with that. And then programmatic came along, and then we've talked about it, like we've gone from maybe 20 sites to 1,200 sites. And what started to happen, if we're going to be really honest and open, is that advertisers, whether it be the agency or the brand, were, I want to find a Telegraph user or a BBC user or a Guardian user, but I'm going to find them on crappy.com. Because it's the same user. It doesn't matter about the environment. We kind of, right place, right time, right message. We forgot about all of that apart from the right person. And so we're chasing people around the internet, and we're bucketing them as the BBC type audience or the Guardian type audience or the Telegraph type audience, but we're buying them much, much cheaper. And then there's a blended CPM at the end. And because that's brought the CPMs down, even if brands wanted to now go back and say, right, well, actually, we're only going to support premium publishers that deserve our money, that actually help society to support them, the price is going to go through the roof compared to what we're paying, because we've been paying this blended CPM with all this crap in the back that's basically brought the price down. And once we take that out, we're going to be shocked. We're just not going to be able to do it. I don't think that genie's going back in the bottle. I don't know what you're thinking.
I'm hopeful. I think, like, naturally the CPMs are going to increase when you run on premium websites, but I think it's a responsible thing to do. Like, we've done a lot of research at RMA where if you're running a programmatic campaign, for instance, by reducing the number of partners you're working with, you're also reducing your carbon emissions. And also, when I was at PwC, we obviously did the PwC ISBA transparency study. Each person that you're running through, whether it's a tech platform on a programmatic campaign, you are paying a fee to run through them. So actually, if you're going direct to a publisher, you're reducing all those fees in the middle.
Quite often it's the publisher paying that fee, though, really, at the end of the day, isn't it? Because it gets taken out before the publisher gets their money. So I think that same report that you mentioned showed something like 50% of every pound was ending up with the publisher and the rest was kind of taken in adtech tax. Yeah.
So, and obviously 15% of programmatic revenue just, was unaccounted for. And actually, to stop that and to avoid that and to ensure that your media budget is being spent in the right way, it's working directly with those publishers, because you know exactly where your advertising is. Like, obviously we both worked in print. Imagine if you spent money on running an ad campaign in print and you went to the newspaper and it just wasn't there, or like 75% was there instead. You'd think, hang on a moment. But because we don't see those digital campaigns all the time, there's less questions around it. So I think, it's really, really important. And that study took a lot longer than PwC wanted it and ISBA wanted it to be. It should have been 6 months, ended up being 18 months, ended up being a lot more money. But I think something like that really opened people's eyes to what was going on within programmatic. And it's, reducing the amount of partners that you work with significantly reduces your tech fees, obviously, and then around sustainability also reduces your carbon emissions, which is really important as well.
Fabulous. Well, we're out of time, but that was an absolute pleasure. I'd love to have you come back on again at some point if that's okay with you. Thank you very much for being on the Six Source podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.